At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES.
Only on Super NES.
You're listening to the SNES podcast with your host, Soul Blazer.
Hello, everybody. This is Super NES Podcast, episode number 249. Once again, this is Greg, joined always by Joe.
Hello.
And we are again doing our special year in review episode. We're just taking a quick look at the games we covered 2024 in the podcast, seeing which ones stuck out in our head, which ones didn't, which ones we really enjoyed, which ones we didn't. I don't know how you feel about this, Joe, but I remember, but I remember thinking when I was looking over the list earlier today, I'm like, 2023 was a pretty good year for games. I really didn't hate anything. I really didn't hate anything that we did 2023.
Yeah.
This year, the quality of the games was more mixed. There were some great games to cover for sure, but there also were some real stinkers, I thought. So,
yeah.
But as we get deeper at the catalog, there are going to be more games like that, I think, which is why that for our next episode, 250, we're going to cover a whole bunch of bad games that neither Joe or I want to really cover in its own separate episode, because it's like we've already covered some bad games recently. It's like I think this is enough of that. So at least minimize the damage to the pain we're feeling like for some of those.
Right.
But anyway, yeah. But overall, though, it looks a pretty good year, I think. There definitely were some obscure games that played this year for sure. So,
yeah, we definitely started the year off pretty strong, considering. But yeah, it was definitely a mixed year. We definitely covered some stinkers for sure. But yeah, it wasn't all negative, and I don't think you could, even if you focused on bad games like we're going to do for episode 250, I still don't think you can have a bad episode or a bad run of episodes in a row that, would be so bad going through the SNES library.
True, yeah. Yeah, and after all, but even bad games can be fun to talk about. So,
right, exactly.
But yeah, so anyway, let's get going here. Since I've done the last couple years' reviews as Point Man, I asked Joe if he wanted to take over Point this year, for change, to mix things up a little bit, and he generously agreed. So,
yeah,
Joe's the one who's going to be introducing each game as we review it, and just talking about it for a little bit before I jump in. And this is always a great barometer to see which games actually stuck with us, because I know some of these games I'm like, we played that this year, but and this first game we're talking about here is a great example of that, I think. So Joe, you can get us going here with our first game.
Yeah, in the beginning of the new year, we decided to tackle Michael Jordan Chaos in the Windy City, which was my nomination, by the way.
Yeah.
So starting the year off good. Yeah, I mean, it was a decent platformer with Michael Jordan as, the star, the man that you control. I thought throwing the basketball to kind of unlock keys and enable different, getting the different balls and whatnot. I thought that was a really good mechanic. I just feel like it was just too generic to be considered a great game, but it was a good game.
Yeah. I generally like it. I generally agree with all that. I thought the actual basketball themed idea of the platform was solid enough. The execution was a bit weak, but overall, as far as being a pretty unique themed platform, it was all right. I mean, we definitely have played worse basketball game. we haven't played too many basketball games yet. We definitely have played like worse platformers on the podcast.
Yes.
But I remember the graphics being pretty good. So sound effects were also like on point. But yeah. So a very interesting celeb themed sports game for sure. That just kind of fell a little bit flat. Not a horrible game, but like at least interesting if it wasn't a platformer for sure. So.
And I mean, if I have to remind everyone, like we played Wizard of Oz last year, and that was, I think we both agreed, was probably the worst platformer we had played. So, I mean, the bar's pretty low.
Yeah.
We followed that game up with Shaq Fu. Man, I have nostalgia for Shaq Fu. This was like one of the games like I begged for the Sega Genesis. So it was cool to play the Super Nintendo version. It's okay fare for what it is. It's, again, cashing in on a celebrity. Shaq was huge at the time. Why the Kung Fu motif, I still don't get it. And, I mean, it's okay. It's not as bad as everybody makes it out to be. I think, YouTube opinions have taken over the general psyche of most people when they talk about Shaq Fu. But the reality is it's a subpar fighting game that had potential. There was definitely a lot of potential there, and I think that potential was eventually reached in something like in Eternal Champions. But, yeah, here it's it's Shaq Fu. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, I think that I remember this was back in January, so I don't like memory's not 100%.
Yeah.
But I believe I remember correctly. The Kung Fu angle came up because Shaq did take Kung Fu for a while, or at least he is a petitioning of Shaq, Kung Fu. I think one of many things he dabbled in over the years.
Right. Which makes sense. Yeah.
So. It's like Shaq Fu is a very infamous game for how bad it is, and while the game is not great, I don't think the game's as horrible as the memes played up to be. I mean, it's at least playable. Is it a great fighting game? No, but it does have a couple of things going forward. At least its uniqueness, and it does have a kind of charm, and it's like badness as a way as far as like being a fighting game that tries and falls short on several marks. Again, not the worst fighter on the system by any means. Pit fighter like anyone. So,
right.
But so while it's not a great game, I don't think the game's as bad as people make it out to be. It's a very fun game to meme up to be bad to be bad in 2024 for sure. And while it certainly misses the mark, it's not a great game. It's at least okay to play with somebody else for a short time to have a bit of fun at the game's expense.
Yeah, absolutely. So we followed that up with Secret of Mana. We pulled out a heavy on this one.
Yeah.
Man, Secret of Mana was gorgeous. I enjoyed the gameplay. It took some time getting used to. I liked the fact that it was technically multiplayer. That was all fun and dandy. Secret of Mana is definitely a highlight this year. And obviously, the Quasimodo sequel that we covered later on fits the same mold. I can't praise that game enough.
Yeah, Secret of Mana is definitely beloved. There's a reason people think of it as one of the best role-playing games, role-playing games like the Super NES. It's a very unique action adventure RPG style game at a time when that genre really wasn't done very much. So, and have to kick off the Mana series, which is still going strong today. Steam sale going on right now, as a matter of fact. So,
is Steam back up because it crashed?
I would not be surprised that it crashed, given how popular the sales tend to be. But it's back up. It's back up because I have it running in the background right now. So, but anyway, the Mana series has definitely been one of the most beloved franchises over the years, and this is, this game's a great example of like why it is. the modern games, the ones that have been the best, the most loved games are the ones that stay true to the formula that this original game really have to populate but help introduce to people. So and also the music. We got to talk about the music at least. The music, the music also great. Yeah, it's a great soundtrack. So, the game, either its original form or the original form, like for one of its remake versions, holds up very well today still, I think, for sure. So, probably one of the best. This may be one of my favorite games for the year. I'm not prepared to say it's my best game of the year yet, because there are a couple other games I'm thinking about, but definitely is up there as far as like being like a great game.
Yeah, I mean, spoiler, it's up there for me for sure. But, you know, for this year, I think I was pretty negative for most of the podcast, to be fair. But yeah, this one was definitely up at the top for sure. Speaking of negative, next we covered Super R-Type. And I'm pretty sure I didn't... Inside Baseball, we're recording this a little earlier than we were supposed to. So usually I listen to the podcast and go through my notes and kind of refresh myself. But I really don't remember playing Super R-Type, which is not a good thing. But also, like, if I do remember correctly, there was like some really bad slowdown going on with this game, and it was kind of choppy if I remember correctly. But the music was decent. And, it's R-Type, so, it's a shooter. But, yeah, I honestly didn't have much of a recollection for this game.
Yeah, I agree with most of that. The graphics also, like, pretty good. The graphics also, like, pretty good, like, the time period. Super R-Type was a very, very early Super NES game, and therefore it suffered some programming issues, slowed down, that kind of stuff. It's a competitive space shooter for what it is. Unfortunately, the slowdown and the very rough, difficult gameplay makes it hard to play like nowadays. I think unless you're like a real big fan of the series, because I do enjoy the R-Type series a lot. And this game when it came out, was a great game, I thought. But Age has not treated this game very well, for sure, on multiple counts. And just like, unless you're like a real big shooter fan, there really isn't any kind of reason to go back and play this game again. Which, if you want to, it's on the Switch now. They added it on there for some reason, but you definitely can check it out that way if you want to, and see if your opinions agree with ours or not.
So next we covered Super Adventure Island 2. This, I believe, was also my pick. This was a game that I basically chose because we played the first Super Adventure Island, and I had a blast with that. So we decided to cover the second one, and it was definitely different than the first. I remember the gambling mechanic kind of being a big pain in the butt, and unfortunately a key, component to the game. Outside of that, graphically good, music was decent. I can't really think of anything that was really negative other than the repetitiveness of it and the gambling that you were kind of forced into.
Yeah, this game really changed the formula a little bit compared to the first game, because it kind of had that like a kind of adventure kind of / Zelda / gambling stuff added on to it instead. So it's fine for what it is. I just prefer the more classic frantic skateboarding rush till you die formula that the earlier games did like so well. Graphically and music wise though, the game's great. For sure. So, I remember the game having a rocking soundtrack. So, So, I mean, if you enjoy the gambling and whatnot, this game can be fun. It's kind of more of a black sheep entry in the series, I think personally, but not a bad game, just very different. So, whether I enjoy it, I think it depends upon what you're looking for.
Yeah, and I definitely think, side note, I think this game could be enjoyed a lot today, and I might have brought it up when we first recorded the podcast, but, like, Game Genie is a thing, and so is, like, cheating in general in emulators. So, like, having infinite money or max money or whatever is completely eliminate that, gambling necessity. So
Right.
that will ease the difficulty of the game.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Definitely so. And there is a third game in the series, too, right, I think? Which we'll have to cover at some point.
I cannot say there is or isn't. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I thought we established a time there was a Japanese-only third game.
It is possible.
Well, we'll have to look into that.
Yeah. So after that, we covered Super Bases Loaded. It's a sports game. I remember I wasn't too keen on the way that the pitch, the pitches come, like, even when you're batting, the view is from behind the pitcher, which really just felt odd. As far as baseball games go, it's a baseball game. It's got the real teams, it's got the real players. But yeah, I mean, it's baseball, man.
Yeah, we covered all three games of the series, this podcast to make life easier. It's like, I remember the third game being the best because they changed the camera perspective in each game, and I think the third one had the best perspective as far as making it easiest to play and pitch, at least my personal preference. So, and the third game was also the one that actually included references to references like real teams as well too. So,
there we go.
But yeah, I mean, for the time being, the 90s, they're great. 90s, they were great baseball games. The Super Bases Loaded series is still very, very, very fondly thought of today. So whether it's the NES games or Super NES games, but they still play fine today. If you want a more simplistic, more easier basic baseball game and don't want to go into kind of more the complexity that modern games have, you still could have some fun with the series. Yeah,
for sure. Then we covered Saturday Night Slime Masters. I think this was a softball from Greg, if I remember correctly.
I try to get a wrestling game every now and then, yes.
Yeah, he thought the wrestling game would be a good idea. So Saturday Night Slime Masters, man. So it's an arcade conversion for the home. They did a good job cramming what you would experience in the arcade in that cartridge. I remember it's beautiful. Big sprites. It kept that aspect from the arcade game. Music was good. Sound effects are good. It's basically a fighting game, not really a wrestling game. So yeah, you have some holds that you can do, but you can still also do your quarter circles and a punch button or a kick button and be able to do, different special moves and whatnot. This was, I could cheat and say this was towards the top of my list, but like I said, I think overall I was pretty negative on the games that we played this year. So saying that Saturday Night Slam Masters is up near the top is kind of, it is what it is.
yeah, it does play more like a fighting game than it is like a wrestling game. Yeah. Kind of like WWF Raw. Is that the one?
Raw and Rumble and Royal Rumble.
Yeah. Yep. So, but yeah, for what it is though, the game's fine. I remember having some fun with it. I mean, if you're looking for a fighting game with like a wrestling code over it, this would do the job pretty well. And so it holds up pretty well today, in that respect, in that way. You're right. The graphics of the game are very nice. This was a Capcom game, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So,
yep.
Well programmed. Good options, good moves. I remember the music being okay. So, pretty decent wrestling game, like what it is.
Yeah. We followed that up with Sparkster. Sparkster was interesting because
it's a sequel to Rocket Knight Adventures.
Yeah, it's a sequel to Rocket Knight Adventures, which was a Genesis-only game,
right.
Which I found very odd that they would just release a sequel on the SNES. But that being said, you get more of the same that you got in the original game. It's slightly altered between the two versions of the Genesis and the Super NES. I believe we discussed that on the podcast.
We did, yeah.
Yeah, overall, it's Sparkster. It's Rocket Knight Adventures. Graphics are great. Platforming's pretty cool and interesting because you have to, at some point, charge up your rocket to get up to higher elevations. And they really did a good job with that mechanic and whatnot. This is another game I can throw at the top because of how good it was. Music was on par, everything. Like, this is just a solid game all around.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I really like this game a lot. It's very hit or miss. That people fans of the series are torn pretty much these days between like which game they like better. I know a lot of people who enjoy Rocket Knight's Adventures better, including friend of the podcast Doom has been on here several times. He prefers the first game over this one. I prefer Sparkster a bit more. They're both solid games. I just think Sparkster touched upon the formula in the first game, did improve upon it enough ways to make it like a fun game. So some of the new moves and abilities that you have, like all that kind of stuff. So. It definitely holds up pretty well today. This game and the other games franchise have recently been re-released in a collection you get on modern systems with some quality improvements, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So definitely worth checking those out.
Next game we covered, Greg was torturing me because he gave me Saturday Night Slam Masters. It's King Arthur's World. This one I remember because I did not enjoy this game at all. Out of all the games we played this year, I honestly have to say this is the bottom of the barrel.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I just couldn't get into it. The concept is nice because it's kind of like Lemmings to a point where like you gotta you have your military people you gotta put out and they're gonna clear the way so this way you can get the king to the end of the puzzle. And it's just, I don't know, it had quite a bit of a learning curve. I think that was the biggest thing I was complaining about when we did originally record it. And, I'm not going to lie, it's not a game I've gone back to improve my gameplay of it. So, other than that, I felt like graphically it was okay for what it is. They have to show a lot of real estate so that you can, plot and plan. So, your sprites are kind of small, but you can see what they are and be able to, make your way through the game. But and music, I think, was okay as well. But that's just it. Like, it's an okay game, and it's like not my style of game. So this just kind of didn't sit with me well.
I can see that. I didn't hate this game as much. So I didn't hate this game as much as you did. I do agree it's more toward the lower end of what we played this year. Because Lemmings was so popular that a whole bunch of rip-offs and clones of it was made back in the day, and this is definitely one of those clones. They tried doing a few different things to make it stand out. Whether or not you enjoy that depends upon what you're looking for, like in your Lemmings style game, I guess. So obviously, it didn't land solidly with Joe or myself, but I don't think the game's bad. If you're looking for like a Lemming-ish type game, this one worth checking out. But I don't. But I also don't think it's good. It's good as Lemmings or like its follow-ups either. So the fact they gave kind of a story and kind of like like medieval fantasy King Arthur theming to it is nice. Just like it's a perfectly fine clone type game basically. So if you enjoy that kind of stuff, you'll probably have some fun with this. Otherwise, I think you probably can pass it. Yeah.
Then we played Jim Power, Lost Dimension, or Lost in the Third Dimension, if I remember. That's the full title. Of course, I didn't write it all down.
It's the Lost Dimension in 3D.
There we go. This is another game
where it used like 3D graphics, but
I was gonna say this is another game where like I feel it's like a blur. Like I know I played it, but I don't remember much about it. I'm pretty sure you and I both weren't really grooving with it that much, and we both were saying that obviously probably playing it in 3D wouldn't help that, but neither one of us had that opportunity to play it in 3D.
Yeah, because the game came with glasses, so I think maybe that would have helped. But graphically, the game's gorgeous, and as far as the and the gameplay is very enough because you go through a whole mix of side-scrolling stages or overhead shooters, that kind of stuff, like additional stages. So the gameplay is good, and so is the music. But the biggest issue for us was those 3D graphics, because the way they use the parallel scrolling effect in the background can be very dizzying and very distracting.
Yeah.
So it was like about the glasses. So, and that's why I said we didn't have a chance to experience the game with the glasses, so I don't know how much that would improve things. But as is right now, we had a hard time playing the game because of the graphical effects that the game uses. So it doesn't bother you. The game itself is pretty good. I think just the 3D effects the game is trying to pull off on very limited 90s hardware definitely hurt it for both of us.
Then we had a guest on the show, and I'm horrible with names, so I apologize. Greg, do you remember?
I don't think I looked this up beforehand. Hold on a moment.
That's okay. I know we've had him on the show before on other episodes too.
Doom was here with us, like this one, right?
There we go. Yeah. Because we covered Legend of the Mystical Ninja.
Right, because he's a huge fan of that game. Yep.
Yes. This was, it was a decent game. I'm kind of upset that we didn't get really more of these games because since the podcast, I've played the N64 follow-up, and I played some of the Famicom Mystical Ninja games, or Goemon, and they're all super fun. They all have great humor. That's the big thing that stuck out for me, was the humor. And it's like it's an action RPG light is the best way to put it, because you do get a shop where you can upgrade weapons and get accessories and things of that nature, but it doesn't, and I think there's stats as well, but I can't remember. But yeah, so it's like it's an RPG, but it's a super light RPG, and it was kind of fun. Like, it's kind of top down-ish. You play it like Zelda, so looks good. Thought the music was good. And like I said, the humor is really what got me.
Yeah. This is a Western release of the Goemon game, which is still going on. I think in Japan. I'm trying to remember, but Konami makes these games, and of course, being a Konami game, is programmed and plays very well. Great humor, great music, great graphics, like the time period. It's a shame we only got a few more of these games. I think that 2 N64 games came out here in the West. Based upon the Goemon franchise, and that was it. So
I know of at least one. So
yeah,
you might be right though. There might be 2.
Yeah. So I agree with you. It's a shame. It's a shame more of these games didn't come out in the West because the gameplay is solid, the humor is very good. Yeah, this game's popular when it came out, and so it holds up pretty well today. So definitely worth playing. Play one of more. If you don't mind a very heavy Japanese-orient-styled platformer game, that can be very challenging at parts. Because I remember both of us struggled at parts of the difficulty. If you can handle all that, the game's still pretty fun to play today.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we covered Home Improvement. This one I went in with low expectations because much like Shaq Fu, the internet, YouTube, has definitely kind of put a stink on this game. And I think we found out that it's really not as bad as people have said. It's kind of repetitive. Like, you have to go left and right through the mazy level to get, whatever tools and whatever else to complete the game. But I thought the levels were, well designed for the most part. You get an interesting blend of weapons. I didn't find the game to be too difficult, but the repetitiveness of the enemies that you come across was kind of eh. But yeah, and I remember, like, music and sound effects were okay, and it stays pretty true to the source material. I mean, as true as you can to a drama show / comedy that was on Friday nights or Thursday nights or whatever night it was on. So yeah, I mean, it's your typical licensed platformer, and they're not all bad. And this was mediocre at best, but it most certainly doesn't deserve the hate that it does get.
Yeah, that was a great summary. Pretty much like fits up my definition and feelings about the game like pretty solidly. I did like again, keeping the theme of the show, like Tim, I did like the manual being a gimmick, or just like real men don't need instructions, right. And if that's all you get. So, you do get the controller, the controllers at least.
Yeah.
They at least give you that, but beyond that, you get nothing else. So, it keeps the show theme very well, I thought. So, it's an okay platformer. I mean, there are better ones system, but there's also worse ones. So, if you're looking for a platformer to play on the system, this one is better than the reputation makes out to be. I think overall it was one of our weaker games we played this year, only because the bar was set so high with everything else that we played.
Yeah, that's
it's
fair.
It's a competent platformer like what it is.
Yeah. Speaking of competent platformers, so the next game we played was Blackthorn. Man. So when we played Flashback, I think I was pretty positive for the most part for that game, but the biggest complaint I had was that it was slow, methodical, and whatever. Blackthorn, falls into that same category. It's slow, it's methodical, it's the same people who made Flashback. So, it's definitely, I can't sit there and say I hate the game, but it's not one I love. It takes time, it takes patience, but the game's gorgeous. Just like Flashback, I love that graphical style. The sound effects and music are great, always fits the mood. It's just, this isn't my kind of game. That's all it is.
Yeah, I like Blackthorn a bit more than you did, I think. It definitely has a very comic book styled graphics and story with it.
Yeah.
The gameplay is slow, which I think is the weapons are very interesting. So I think if you can get around that limitation and the limitations like don't mind that, you can have really fun style comic book / action game here for sure. So we don't mind the slowness factor. It definitely Interplay published this game. It definitely is one of their forays in the console market for company best known like for its PC games. So and the PC market shows on here because the game does feel very PC-ish in places for sure. But if you're looking for a different style action game and don't mind the slowness, this is still like a pretty good game, I thought.
Yeah, and then man, we covered Front Mission. Guess who picked this one?
I'm a huge fan of the franchise. So,
I tried really hard to like this game. It's just, tactical RPGs are not my thing. Tactical games in general are not my thing. If you haven't figured that out over the years. But yeah, it's the story was good. The gameplay was okay for what it was. It gives you lots of options. Oh my god, the different things that you can buy and upgrade for your mech. That was just like mind-blowing how much stuff they had in there. But yeah, just wasn't my type of game.
Fair enough. I mean, I think that this game did not get a Western release for a long time, like until the GBA version of it came out like many years later. But yeah, all the things people know and love about the franchise started here. It's like you have like great stories, very detailed, serious, mature stories. Two different factions to play as, which doubles your gameplay length, which is great. Awesome music, like a very good soundtrack, for sure. Very good graphics for the system, and like Joe said, lots of customization options, like your flavor advancers, for sure in the combat field. So there's lots of playability here. So if you do enjoy tactical games like I do, this one definitely is still fun to play today. The modern versions, I think, are a little bit easier. The modern versions are definitely a bit easier to swallow because they have the usual quality of life improvements to enhance the gameplay between like then versus now. But Front Mission is still a really good game. I think Front Mission 1 and 2, the remakes came out recently a couple of years ago on modern systems, and I played those games again too, as well, and they're great games still today, I think. So, definitely, it's a shame the franchise has not done better in the West, because very few of the games were originally released here in the West. Front Mission 3 for the PlayStation was, and it's one of my favorite games. It's my favorite game in the franchise. But for sure. Front Mission is a very interesting Square game that I'm glad finally got released. That I'm glad finally got a proper release here in the West.
Then we covered Addams Family Values, which I remember both of us going into this. We were both like, "Oh my god, this is just an upgraded Fester's Quest." I mean, I don't remember both of us really loving this game, but that being said, it was better than Fester's Quest. We definitely, I think, agreed that for the most part it was super cryptic. Other than that, the graphics were okay. Music's there. Sound effects fit the game. This is just another one that I was not high on, even though I was kind of excited for it when I picked it. So there's that.
Yeah, the game does keep the theming of Addams Family pretty well. Graphically, the game's nice, and the music and sound effects are pretty good too. But the biggest problem with this game that I remember us talking about is where to go and how to go about doing it. A map and a guide is really critical for this game, I think. And it's also a very hard game. I mean, Fester's Quest is not an easy game either, but at least that game gets easier with time because the factor of not knowing what to do, where to go, unless you have help in front of you. And save points are few and far between. They're hard to get to for sure because you have to go back and talk to people. Because you have to talk to the thing to save your game, and sometimes all the way across the map. So all those frustrations unfortunately kind of bogged down what could be like a great game. As it is, the game's still average. It's still it's still a decent game for what it is, but the game could have been a lot better had some of these quality of life issues been smoothed out, unfortunately. Which, again, with licensed games, it's hard to know if they ran out of money, ran out of time. Right. Just didn't care because they're in a contract to the game. It's like there's so many reasons that the game could have turned out the way it was. So, I mean, as it is, it's a playable game. You can certainly get some fun with it. But a guide and a map on hand is definitely strongly recommended if you're going to tackle this game.
Yeah, and talk about another game that kind of just throws you out there. Next game we covered was Big Sky Trooper. Biggest thing I remember about this game, and it's about the only thing I remember, is I kept choosing the robot, which is apparently the load function. So I kept I kept getting soft locked and could not get off the ship or do anything until I realized, finally, after looking up a game fact, that you have to choose the boy or the girl, and the robot is a load feature. So then I was able to get the story and kind of play a little bit. I don't know. For me, this game was just uninspiring. I don't remember it having anything fantastic. Yeah, this one really is a blur for me. I really wish I had looked at my notes.
I definitely like that. Yeah. I definitely like this game better than you did. I think read the manual beforehand is definitely a must for this game because it's one of the handful of games that you really have to read the manual for. This is also a LucasArts game, so it has LucasArts programming style. It has the great humor that they're known for. The present. Like present all through the game, good music, like good graphics. So, if you enjoy LucasArts games, I think you're probably like this one. It's not a great game. I think I enjoy Zombies at My Neighbors better, but as far as being a different game, because you're also like you have a little bit of choice what you do because you're picking plans on a map and going there and going stages in different orders and whatnot. So I think what the game was trying to do it's fine. It's just not a regular. It's not a regular platformer. But it is a very good LucasArts made game as far as like the gameplay and the humor and the programming and everything else goes. Very ambitious project. Maybe it didn't always land. Obviously it didn't land with Joe. I do think this game does have some problems, but I was very impressed by how ambitious the game was and how unique it is. It's still a very interesting game to play today.
Then we looked at the sequel to Secret of Mana, Secret of Evermore.
Not really a sequel, just more kind of like strongly inspired by, because the American company, the American branch of Square was given the mandate from the corporate overlord to make a game similar to Mana, but not really. So they made a very Western style, Western themed game.
And man, I thought this was just as good as Secret of Mana. I enjoyed it. This is another one. Yeah, I mean it's Square, man. So great music, great sound effects, graphics are fantastic. The story's pretty good. There's not much negative I think that I even said about this game, other than the fact that I felt it was lacking some of the charm that like Secret of Mana had, and of course the inability to play multiplayer, which should have been there because your main protagonist has, a dog with them.
Yeah.
Like it's built in right there. Second player, but
Yeah. If I remember my notes correctly on this, the programming team was told not to bother with that because of lack of experience, lack of time. But anyway. A lot of people who love Secret of Mana don't like this game very much. I think because of those reasons you mentioned, that the game's kind of lacking the charm.
Yeah.
I mean, it is humorous. They're trying for a very Western themed style humor and gameplay with this, which doesn't always land with some people. So I can see fans of the series feeling like that Evermore is just like a very pale imitation imitation the like what Mana is. And while I agree the game's not as fun as Mana, I think Evermore is still a pretty good game in its own right. Definitely should be played to give it a fair shake. Don't just take people's assumptions for what they say about this game for what it is, because maybe it doesn't hold up as well nowadays because the Mana franchise has evolved and improved since then. The humor in this game is somewhat dated in some ways, I think, but what the American branch of Square was trying to do at the time, I thought that I thought they did a great job with trying to get an inexperienced team of people because like I said, most of the people were hired brand new to work on this game. For this game to be as good as it is, considering all the factors that working against it and the factors that led to being made, is a testament to how good the formula of the gameplay is, I think. So, Evermore is still a pretty decent Mana-style game to play, even if it's not quite as good as the original ones.
Yeah. We then followed that up with EVO, Search for Eden. Man, this one, it's it's a life simulator RPG. That's the best way to put it.
Kind of, sort of, yeah.
And you literally evolve. This one, what killed me was the gameplay loop. Like, you just had to keep going around, fighting, eating, and just beefing up your character. The cool thing was that based on the different traits that you put points into, they evolve differently, and there were so many different possibilities. I think there was something like you could save up to 80 different characters or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, there was a lot of variety here. Music was so that didn't help it. But yeah, I mean, graphically it's fine. It was the gameplay loop that I remember having the biggest issue with, because I think it was maybe not the first boss, but definitely the second boss. Like, by the time I got to him, I just wasn't strong enough yet, and it was just like, whack, done. So yeah, that's Evo.
Yeah. I think this is the game that you and I probably differed the most on, because I love this game. In fact, this may be my favorite game we played this year, because I have strong nostalgia for this game, playing it as a kid.
Yeah.
So, you're right. The game does have the game is definitely rough around the edges. You definitely could have used some more time polishing, because you can't get into the problem, because you totally can't experience the problem that Joe was talking about there, like having cheese boss fights because your particular evolution at that point is not a good one for it. But I love the customization of the game. I love how many ways you can play it. All the different combinations of creatures that you can evolve at, abilities and whatnot. I like the music in this game. I think it's a good soundtrack. The graphics are very simple but pleasing. It's just a very unique game, and I think the fact that it was so unique and just so charming was one reason that it really endeared itself to me so much as it did 30 years ago, and it's still pretty. Yeah, I agree with the game. I agree the game can be rough to get into nowadays, for sure. But I'd love to see a more modern. I remember saying this. I remember saying this in the podcast. I'd love to see more I'd love to see more modern take on this game.
Right.
But I really do love it because of the gameplay and because of how unique that it is. So there definitely is a lot of ways you can play this game and experience the game. So if you're willing to ignore the roughness and just enjoy the game for the cuteness of it and the options, I think it's still a pretty good game to play today. But I'm not going to blame anybody like Joe who bounce off this game, because it can be a hard game to get into today if you're not familiar with the concept at all. But I think the game definitely has a lot to offer if you're willing to spend the time to work on the hood, as it was, and just get used to the mechanics of it.
So it just sounds like you're telling me to get over myself.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not blaming anybody for not liking the game, because it is rough to get into. But I think I think the game's still fun to play. Yeah.
Speaking of fun to play, how about we do some gambling? we played Vegas Stakes next. This game was, it's Vegas Stakes. Like, you're playing, card games, slots. It's actually pretty interesting because of the fact that it includes a story, and you can interact with the individuals that are in your party as your friends. This is okay for a gambling game. I can't hate it because there's only so much you can do, and it does accomplish that. But it's you're playing poker, and you're playing roulette and pulling the handle on the slots. So, there's not much there. The music I thought was okay. Sound effects do the job. Graphics are decent for what they are. They represent the games correctly. The characters look okay. I think the biggest issue I had with this game, I think I complained about how you don't see the other players that you're playing against, so it feels very solo and alone. But I think that was about it.
Yeah, overall, I agree with most of that. I actually had more fun with this game than I thought I would, considering it's just basically gambling games.
Right.
It's a how to develop a game published by Nintendo, so the game's programmed to play very well because of it, because they obviously knew what they were doing with the system and whatnot. So, there's more to this game than I thought there was going to be, and it surprised me, and I guess that's one of the reasons I liked it. If you're looking for a basic gambling game nowadays, it still holds up pretty well, I think. I mean, it's very simple and bells and whistles, but the fact you can progress to different casinos, and there are actually story options in this game and whatnot, definitely makes it. Definitely makes it like a pretty pleasing gambling game, like good graphics and music, like Joe said. Yeah, so definitely one of the better gambling games. Gambling games that the Flight System for sure. Just very, probably one of the more pleasant surprises that we played for games this year, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next game was kind of a pleasant surprise as well. We played Hammerlock Wrestling. Now, I remember gameplay not being fantastic, but the presentation was above and beyond what I expected. But also kind of troubling because of the fact that it's split into 3 different columns, the action's happening in the middle, while you're having action scenes happening on the top and the bottom. And, it's definitely very cinematic-like, which is a nice touch for the game, but it's also very distracting. And I think that was the biggest thing that you and I agreed on, was the fact that the game was just very distracting, and we both felt that there was a timing mechanic that I don't think neither one of us ever got down.
Yeah, I thought this game was all right, but this probably may have been one of my biggest letdowns for the year, only because that while very unique, that 3-style graphical mode I found to be very distracting.
Yeah.
And really made it hard to play the game. If that wasn't there, I probably would enjoy the game more. But as it was, it's overall like an arm wrestling game. It includes a lot of options. And it has wrestlers based upon real wrestlers as well in the game. So. Yeah, graphically, sound-wise, the game's good. It just I never got used to the presentation style. So I mean, I think for that reason, it was just a letdown for me, unfortunately. But I mean, the game's fine for what it is.
Well, talking about presentation, man, Brunswick. Was it Brunswick Championship Bowling? Is that what the whole title was? Something like that.
Something like that. So,
I mean, it's bowling, man. I don't think either one of us absolutely hated this. I think I complained that, it's just repetitive and kind of bland. But, I mean, it represents bowling for the time period, for sure. Yeah. Bowling has not evolved much over, the course of years. Side note, I can't remember the big professional guy we were talking about for this game. But anyways, I recently got a recent bowling game, and I do mean bowling. It's like PBA bowling, 2021. I don't know. I got it for 99 cents. Anyways,
okay.
He's one of the legends that you can unlock. So, I mean, people still recognize this guy for what he's done. And, I mean, it's bowling, man. You throw the ball down the lane. You tap the buttons to make sure you get the swing right and power. And I mean, there's nothing to hate here. In all honesty,
no, it's a very simple game. It's this is the serious basic bowling sim for the system. It's if you wanted a realistic bowling game of the '90s to play, this is probably one of the better ones out there to play. But presentation is very good, graphics are nice, sound effects are good. The game set out to be a realistic bowling game. That's what it did. So I mean, if you want that, great. If you don't, you're not going to play it. I mean, it's as simple as that. But just the only slight knock I might get this game is the fact that besides it besides you not seeing other people bowl, unfortunately, is that bowling's already kind of slow as it is, and this game is even slower than regular bowling. So you definitely have to have some patience to play this game, unfortunately. But they set out to make a serious simulation bowling game, and bowling game like they succeeded. And just whether or not whether or not you're going to play, it just depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah, and the last game we played for the year was Dig and Spike Volleyball. Greg and I definitely had a difference in opinion on this game. I graphically thought it was kind of muddy and not so great. Backgrounds were fine, but it's cool that you had the different modes. You could play as the women on the beach versus like the Olympic style on inside like the gymnasium. But yeah, just very low res sprites, which was kind of disappointing overall. But I'm not a volleyball guy where Greg is, so Greg understood and appreciated the nuances of the game, where I found a lot of frustration, not only in the gameplay, but the fact that you couldn't really see where the ball was going sometimes, or know who you were controlling unless they were flashing. And like, it's nice that they had that flash so that you could kind of be like, oh, there's my guy. But I don't know. It just didn't connect with me. And yeah, it's not my thing.
I don't think our opinion of this game vary too much. I agree with most of what you said. It's like, yeah, I probably had more fun with the game. I probably had more fun with the game than you did because I like bowling. I'm sorry, bowling. I'm sorry, bowling on the brain because I like volleyball. But it's not. But it's not a great volleyball game either. I mean, the options are great. The settings the settings you can do are good, but the graphics are muddy. The controls are not great. The mechanics are kind of hit or miss. It's like it's an okay volleyball game. It's like I played worse, but they were trying for a very. It's unfortunate because they're trying for a very robust game with the options of playing both indoors and outdoors. Just those muddy graphics and the bad controls and just the controlling camera and control scheme just don't do the game any favors. Unfortunately, I mean it's all right, but this probably was one of my bigger letdowns for the year for sure. As far as because screenshots make the game look great, but seeing the game in motion and just seeing the graphics blur and tear, you're like, what happened here with this? But it's an RE volleyball game. It's just like it's not great.
All right. Well, now that we've reviewed again all the games that we did this year, are you sticking with Evo as your number one for the year or what?
Probably the Evo or Front Mission, because I think because I have nostalgia for both games a lot, and so I think they're both like I think both games hold up very well. Secret of Mana looks up there too for sure, because that game also holds up very well today, I think. So yeah.
So I mean, obviously, I'm the guy who didn't have a Super NES growing up, so all these are new to me every time we play. For the most part, yeah, there's some that obviously the more popular games I've dabbled with. But yeah, I mean, I gotta kind of stick with Secret of Mana, I think. And, maybe that is like the cop out, pick, but Secret of Mana. Saturday Night Slam Masters is a fantastic game, but that's also a game like I had some familiarity with because I played the arcade game. But those are really the two big ones, I think. Part of me kind of wants to say Sparkster, but also like I'm a original Rocket Knight guy, so it's kind of hard to pick Sparkster. But yeah, I mean, I think overall, Secret of Mana, if I had to pick up a runner-up, it would probably be Saturday Night Slam Masters.
Really? Okay, all right.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm locking in. I will say, Legend of Mystical Ninja was a surprise. I wasn't expecting that to be as good as it was, and then sending me down the rabbit hole of all the Goemon games that we didn't see, and including releases that are coming out still.
Yep.
I think I ended up.
So active. Yep.
Yeah, I think I ended up picking up
franchise.
one of the more recent ones on the Switch. So, I mean, like, it's still going. So, I do want to give a nod to that game because it did send me down that rabbit hole. But
it's very charming.
Yeah.
If you enjoy very Japanese, very heavy, Oriental, slapstick, funny kind of humor stuff, definitely a good game.
So, I guess that brings us to what was the one game. We're just going to do one game that you absolutely didn't enjoy at all this year. I'm obviously the point guy, so I'm going to go first. And sorry, Greg, I love you, you know that. But King Arthur's World takes the cake. For me, like, I didn't really enjoy Evo all that much either. But if I was stuck with a gun to my head and I had to choose between the two, I'm playing Evo before I play King Arthur's World. It's just, unfortunately, this, like I said, both of those are kind of not my thing. And
I get it. Yeah.
And to be fair, Front Mission is not my thing either. But Front Mission had a lot of pluses going for it outside of it's a tactical RPG.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, when we set this list up, I'll be honest, I expected I was going to be like, oh, Shaq Fu or Home Improvement. Like, those were going to, be the ones that we were going to poop on. Or Vegas Stakes. You know what I mean? Like, those are the ones I didn't expect to be good. But yeah, I think, number one, absolutely got to go with King Arthur's World.
I didn't. So I did dislike a number of games. I did. I'm not sure I hated anything. I still had a small bit of fun in something. But I'd say, So I'd say for me, it's a toss up. It's a toss up between two of the more recent games. Hammerlock Wrestling and Deacon Spike Volleyball, because both those games for me had serious issues as far as like gameplay and graphics went. Yeah. So, they took me out of my element so much that it really hurt my enjoyment of the, hurt my overall enjoyment of the games. Despite both games having robust options, good soundtracks, all that kind of stuff. But just like you went into those games with, as typical, you go into a game with low expectations, you usually get them crushed. You go in there with you go into a game with high expectations, and they usually get slammed. So, and I expected both those games to be better than they actually were. So for me, I'm taking those two games.
That's fair, absolutely. So, I mean, that's our year in a nutshell. I definitely want to hear you guys sound off. Let us know what you thought our 2024 was. I think overall it was a good mixed bag. I like it when we can cover some stinkers, but also we get some gems, and we have a couple that we know that we're absolutely gonna smash it.
Yes, and on that vein, next time on the other podcast for our 250th special episode, we're going to cover a whole bunch of bad games like all at once in one episode. Yes. So which will not be included, by the way, in our next year compilation, because it's not going to be fair to all the other games that we're going to play.
Correct.
It's like these bad games, putting in a vacuum. We'll talk about them. We'll talk about them here in this episode, and never touch them again. Probably. So,
more than likely. I don't know if you want to spoil the entire list, and I didn't plan on spoiling the entire list, but I did want to just mention.
We can mention we haven't finalized all the games quite yet. I think there's one or two games that may be taken out because of lack of time or whatever. But if you want to go ahead and get them to the list, we have at least like so-called semi-final approval. That's fine.
Yeah. So we have Bronchi the Bronchosaurus. Most of these games I've never even heard of, never mind played. Breakthrough, Bebe's Kids, that one I have played, not that one's good. Not going to be fun to revisit. Barbie Supermodel. That was Greg's pick, by the way. Not just joking. Balls 3D. Cool World. Doomsday Warrior. Family Dog. The Flintstones. Gun Force. James Bond Jr. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Rocco's Modern Life. Spunky's Dangerous Day. Which I already know I'm not gonna like because it's one of those escort. It's all escort missions. Like you have to.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Okay,
so I already know. Like, yeah. Anyways, Ultimate Fighter, which is not UFC. And then Ultraman Towards the Future. And we based this on, well, I mean, I compiled a giant list of games that basically were all ranked either 1 star, under 20%, I think. Basically, that have a reputation for being bad. There were also, 5 or 6 games that I did choose that were shot down because we're going to cover them as their own thing, in which I completely agree with Greg after hearing him out. So, yeah, I think we're going to have a pretty good special episode for number 250. I can't believe the podcast is at 250. Yeah,
there's 2 of us.
Yeah, I mean, you've been here since the beginning. I was like looking at like when I started and like looking at where we're at now. So, yeah.
We're right about at 10 years at this point. I mean, not quite. We will do something. I do want to. So I do want to. I do want to do something special at the actual 10-year mark. But we're, but we're pretty close to it. Yeah. So yeah. So been a long time for sure. But anyway, yeah. So like recording that next, and after that we're going to like talk about. And so after that, Joe and I still need to finalize our list for our list of games, like for next year. So probably just because it's going to be a much more varied list. I think it's going to be certainly going to be a lot of like more like unique games, a lot of more like. Like possibly overhyped or possibly underlooked games because we have covered most of our heavy hitters.
Yeah.
There's a few very popular games we haven't. There's a few really big games we haven't like talked about yet. For example, we definitely have a Kirby game or 2 we can cover. For sure. So, and they definitely. There definitely are a few popular games still, but yeah, we're definitely gonna have a much more kind of lower key, varied like game. Try to explore some of the more depths to the library the system has to offer and see what what worked and what didn't. So, and also cover the 6 or 7 games that we kind of left out of the bad game episode to give them. Get their own coverage for one reason or another. So, so stay tuned. So thank you very much for always being here with us on the podcast for this year. Hope to see and hear all you guys again for 2025. And Joe, as always, thank you again also for being with us this year. And,
of course.
And looking forward to having you again for next year. So, if you have any questions, comments, or feedbacks about this or anything else, feel free to leave us a comment in our Facebook group, or you can also email directly at the SNESpodcast@yahoo.com. Joe, where can they reach you at?
You can reach me at JOESUX30 on Twitter. I have a very public Facebook. You can find me on there. Not family friendly. I got to throw that warning out every single time because I forget sometimes that we are a family friendly podcast. What else? Man, the Radical Retro Roundup is still going. We took the entire month of December off. So man, I don't even remember now what we covered last time. But anyways, I released the last episode at the beginning of this month, and that was it. I didn't even give George a heads up. I just, like, while we were recording, I was just like, oh yeah, by the way, happy, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. Like, we're not recording again until sometime in January. So it was a nice little surprise for him. But yeah, definitely check out the Radical Retro Roundup. Google it. It pops up. I wish I could remember websites and things of that nature, but I'm horrible with that. Yeah. Oh, you know what? One thing that Greg and I don't do, and I'm one of those people that hate it when like YouTubers are like hit subscribe and ring the bell and all that other stuff. But honestly, if you're listening to the podcast, head over and like give us a comment on like iTunes or what other platform that you're hearing the podcast. I like to see those every once in a while. Know that I'm doing a good job or a bad job and what I need to improve on. I started doing the same on my podcast. It's like, please comment. Let me know what I'm doing bad so I can improve. So.
Agreed. Yep, I agree totally. Totally. That's a good call out. So.
Oh, and the other thing, please. If you have any questions or anything like that, reach out in the SNES podcast Facebook. I have it there. I'm an admin there, so I see everything that comes in. So it'll be answered. I guarantee it. And just even if you have podcast ideas, I'm all ears at least.
Yep, sure, definitely. So, all right. Thank you again, as always, for being here, everybody. We appreciate it. And we'll see you again next year, hopefully. Stay safe, be well, and catch you all again later. Thanks, all.
Bye.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power. Deep power.